Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into quite a stack of sources here, all centered on the legendary figure of Hercules, specifically one of the most, well, brutal and surprising of his famous labors.
That's right. We've got material here drawing from, the real bedrock of classical literature. We're talking Greek tragedies, Roman
And
epics.
historical accounts too, right?
Yeah, and detailed mythological summaries, all focused on this single, challenging test set before this, well, iconic hero.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the story of Hercules' fourth labor, the capture of the monstrous Erymanthian boar,
And crucially,
and the crucial, difficult condition that he had to bring it back alive.
exactly, that's the key. So we're going to meticulously examine the nature of this terrifying creature, the widespread devastation it inflicted.
Which sounds pretty bad.
Oh, it was. And the deliberate cunning behind King Eurystheus' seemingly impossible command. Then there's the clever strategy Hercules employed to succeed where, brute force just wouldn't cut it. And we also have these unexpected, almost deeply tragic events that unfolded out in the wilderness during his hunt.
Yeah, that part's often overlooked.
It is. It's a story that goes far beyond a simple monster slaying. It gives us insights into intellect, endurance, the raw power of the ancient world, and even, maybe, the dangerous nature of heroism itself.
So settle in with your sources as we take a deep dive into the myth of the Erymanthian boar. Okay, let's start by trying to understand the threat itself. Our sources, they paint this really vivid, quite terrifying picture of the Erymanthian boar. This wasn't just like a big pig, was it? It was described in terms that are almost monstrous.
Absolutely. When these ancient texts describe it, the language they use is clearly designed to inspire fear. It's called shaggy and wild, emphasizing its untamed nature. They note its vast weight, which suggests a size far, far beyond any ordinary boar you might encounter.
Right.
And that detail, foaming jaws, it immediately brings to mind a creature just consumed by rage, ready to attack without any hesitation. It's clearly presented as a creature of myth.
Yeah. Ferocity, its scale, it's all exaggerated beyond natural limits. It had to be, really, to make it a worthy foe for Hercules.
And this terror, it was tied to a very specific place in the ancient Greek world, wasn't it? It wasn't just roaming anywhere.
No, definitely not. It's firmly placed in the wilderness of Arcadia.
Okay, Arcadia.
Precisely. The myth situates this creature right in the rugged geography of the central Peloponnese in Arcadia, specifically around Mount Erymanthos.
Right.
Our sources even detail its haunts. They describe it living in the glens of Lampeia, near the vast marsh of Erymanthos.
Wow, specific.
Very. And sallying forth from the thick-wooded, cypress-bearing heights of Erymanthos. So this rooted the terror in a real wild landscape. It suggests the bird was almost an embodiment of the untamed, dangerous parts of nature you find in those remote regions.
And the devastation it caused wasn't minor, was it? It sounds like it basically paralyzed life in those areas.
It was widespread and catastrophic. The boar didn't just, occasionally bother a few farmers.
The texts say it would harry the groves of Arcadia, and specifically abuse the land of Pholis. That indicates a relentless region-wide impact.
Abuse the land. That's strong phrasing.
It is. Descending from its mountain lair, its incredibly powerful tusks were just weapons of destruction, mercilessly goring livestock.
Which would be devastating for farmers.
Absolutely, a huge economic blow. And simply razing farmlands, destroying crops, livelihoods, the constant threat drove people from their homes. Survival became incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, in the regions it terrorized.
So this level of destruction, it feels like more than just, a wild animal protecting its territory or something. Was there maybe a deeper significance? Some sources hint at a possible divine connection.
That's a really fascinating layer the sources add. The boar was undeniably this fear-inspiring creature of the wilderness right there on Mount Erymanthos. And Mount Erymanthos itself was said to be sacred. Apparently, it was once dedicated to the mistress of the animals, likely referring to some ancient goddess of the wild. And in classical times, it remained a specific haunt of Artemis.
Artemis, goddess of the hunt in the wilderness.
Exactly. So one perspective presented in the texts is that when a goddess like Artemis maybe wanted to express wrath or punish a region, she might send a rampaging boar. They often draw a parallel to the Caledonian boar.
Ah, the one from the story of Meleager.
That's the one, sent by Artemis to punish the people of Caledon because they'd neglected her sacrifices. So this suggests the Erymanthian boar might have been viewed not just as an animal, but maybe as a manifestation of divine displeasure.
Or just the raw, dangerous, uncontrollable power of nature itself.
Exactly, embodied by a wrathful goddess, perhaps.
Wow. That adds immense weight to the task Hercules was given. It's not just animal control. It's potentially confronting a force linked to the divine, a symbol of nature's untamed, destructive side.
Precisely. And this brings us naturally to the man who set the task, King Eurystheus.
Ah, yes. Hercules' taskmaster.
He was well aware of the terror the boar inflicted, and he undoubtedly recognized the extreme difficulty of dealing with it.
The cowardly king in Mycenae, always dreaming up these deadly chores. What was his specific command this time? It had that twist, didn't it?
It did. His fourth command was very precisely calculated for maximum difficulty. Capture the Erymanthian boar and bring it back alive to him in Mycenae.
Right, bring it back alive.
The alive part was absolutely crucial. That's where the cunning, or maybe cruelty, lay.
Why that specific condition, though? Why not just order Hercules to kill the beast that was causing so much suffering? It seems like that would be the logical thing.
Well, that was the truly cruel twist. It was designed almost certainly to guarantee Hercules' failure, or more likely, his death. Our sources emphasize this difference. While the Nemean lion was invulnerable to conventional weapons, impossible to kill easily, the Erymanthian boar, because of its sheer ferocity, immense power, and untamed spirit, was considered basically impossible to capture alive through normal means.
So killing it would have been hard enough.
Monumental, yes. But capturing such a powerful, wild creature whole, without killing it or maiming it beyond recovery, that was seen as a task of a completely different order of magnitude, arguably much greater.
So it wasn't just a test of strength, it was a deliberate trap. Eurystheus wasn't hoping Hercules would succeed, he was hoping the boar would gore him to death while he was trying to subdue it.
Precisely. It demanded more than just the overwhelming physical might Hercules had shown before, like with the lion or the hydra.
Right.
It required confronting something inherently untamable and finding a way to bring it under complete control without destroying it. It needed a different kind of ingenuity, a different kind of thinking.
But Hercules, well, he was bound by his penance, wasn't he? For the tragic killing of his family. He didn't really have a choice but to accept this formidable and frankly cruel task.
No choice.
And he couldn't just rely on his club or his arrows here, not if the goal was alive.
No, that approach just wouldn't work. He understood this labor required a totally different strategy. The sources suggest he needed a deep understanding of the wilderness, strategic thinking, and the patience of a seasoned hunter.
Okay.
He knew he couldn't simply overpower this creature head-on and then just drag it back. So he set off towards Mount Erymanthos with this grim determination, recognizing the intellectual and endurance challenge ahead. It shows a side of his heroism we don't always focus on as much.
Adaptability.
Exactly.
So the hunt began, up on the wild, dangerous slopes of Mount Erymanthos. How did he even start tackling a task like this? Where do you even begin with a creature like that?
Well, Hercules didn't just immediately rush in swinging his club. No. The sources tell us he spent days, maybe even weeks, tracking the massive boar. He actually engaged in the fundamental practices of a hunter, observing its habits.
Okay, like what?
Its usual feeding grounds down in the lowlands, its paths of movement across the mountains. He learned that while it wreaked havoc in the warmer valleys, it often retreated to the higher, colder peaks, especially, during certain seasons or weather conditions.
So he's learning its patterns.
Exactly. This period of patient observation and learning the creature's patterns was absolutely critical. It wasn't just about finding it was about understanding its relationship with the environment.
Patience and careful study of the terrain and the animal's behavior. That's quite a contrast to, say, wrestling the Nemean lion in its den, or wading into a swamp to fight the hydra. It really highlights that adaptability you mentioned before.
It does.
And it was during this tracking phase, while he was out there in the wilderness, that our sources recount this famous, although quite tragic, encounter.
Yes, this is a significant digression within the story of the labor itself, but it's one that's really deeply entwined with Hercules' character and the nature of his quest. While hunting the boar, he encountered his old friend, the wise centaur Pholus.
A centaur. Those fascinating, complex figures of Greek mythology, half man, half horse. And Pholus, he was known to be different from many of his wilder kin, wasn't he? More civilized, maybe. More hospitable.
Exactly. Pholus was renowned for his wisdom, his knowledge of nature and healing, and his civilized hospitality. He stood in stark contrast to the often savage and unruly nature of other centaurs.
Like the ones who caused chaos at that wedding.
Precisely, the wedding of Pirithous. So Hercules was warmly welcomed by Pholus at his dwelling, maybe a cave or something similar, and in the spirit of friendship, Pholus offered him wine.
Mm.
But this wasn't just any ordinary wine. Our sources describe it as a jar of sacred wine, a precious treasure that belonged not just to Pholus, but was the collective property of all the centaurs of the region.
Oh no, opening a communal sacred treasure, especially something as potentially potent as ancient wine, while hosting a figure like Hercules. That sounds like an invitation for trouble in a world with its own rules.
It absolutely proved to be. The moment the jar was open, the intoxicating aroma of this powerful, aged wine just wafted through the mountains.
You could probably smell it for miles.
Apparently. And this scent inevitably drew the other centaurs in the area. Creatures who were, as the sources really emphasize, unaccustomed to the strong wine.
Okay, so wild nature plus strong drink they weren't used to. Bad combo.
Explosive combination. They were wild by nature, and the powerful, unfamiliar effects of this potent drink combined with their inherent aggression. It just created an immediate violent situation.
So what started as a peaceful visit between friends quickly devolved into a violent drunken brawl. Hercules versus the wild centaurs.
Precisely. The other centaurs, driven wild first by the aroma and then by the taste of the wine, they attacked. Despite Pholus being his friend and possibly trying to calm his kinsmen down,
Right.
Hercules had to defend himself against their violent assault. He used his characteristic weapons, his immense strength, his club, and crucially, his deadly arrows.
And these arrows, they were the ones tipped with the venom of the Lernaean hydra, right? The instantly fatal poison from his second labor.
Yes, the incredibly potent and lethal hydra venom he had collected. And tragically, in the chaos and maybe the aftermath of the fight, a terrible accident occurred.
No.
Pholus, perhaps examining one of the arrows, maybe trying to understand the weapon that had defeated his kinsmen, or perhaps just careless in the tension. He accidentally pricked himself with one of Hercules' hydra-poisoned arrows.
And the venom was so deadly that even a minor scratch was fatal. For a centaur, too.
Tragically, yes. Our sources confirm that Pholus died instantly from the wound caused by the hydra venom. It was deeply unfortunate, unexpected, and a really somber event that interrupted Hercules' mission.
That's heartbreaking. It adds such a layer of profound sadness to the whole story. And as some sources point out, it reveals something deeply unsettling about Hercules himself, doesn't it? About his power.
It absolutely does. As one source poignantly notes, this incident starkly highlighted the dangerous nature of Hercules' very essence, even his weapons. His power wasn't just confined to his physical strength. It extended to everything he used, everything he came into contact with.
Like collateral damage waiting to happen.
Almost. Carrying the potential for unintended lethal consequences that could strike even his closest friends. It weaves this thread of tragedy and moral complexity through his character. It shows that the path of the hero is fraught with peril, not only for his enemies, but sometimes, accidentally, for those he cares about too.
It's a detail that really sticks with you. It makes his journey feel less like a simple checklist of tasks and more like a difficult, often painful path. So after burying his friend, did he bury Pholus?
Yes, the sources say he gave Pholus a proper burial.
Okay, so after burying his friend and dealing with the surviving centaurs, Hercules somehow had to put aside this grief and resume the hunt for the boar.
Yes, he had to steel himself. The task given by Eurystheus still remained. Leaving that somber scene behind, Hercules refocused his grim determination on the primary quest that had brought him to Mount Erymanthos, finding and capturing that boar alive. So having witnessed firsthand the kind of devastation his brute force could unleash, even accidentally with his friend Pholus, Hercules seemed to grasp more fully that sheer physical power wasn't going to work for capturing the boar alive. He needed to be smarter.
Yeah.
He needed a strategy that neutralized the beast's strengths without actually killing it.
Okay, so this is where the planning and observation really pay off.
Yeah.
How did he outsmart this creature, described as having such vast weight and untamed spirit? It seems impossible.
Well, instead of confronting the boar directly where it was strongest, down in the lower forests and valleys where it could just rampage, he began to actively drive it. He used his knowledge of its habits, the terrain he'd studied, to herd it, deliberately pushing it higher and higher up the steep slopes of Mount Erymanthos, towards the peaks that were, crucially, covered in deep snow.
Using the mountain itself, the environment, as a weapon. That's a brilliant piece of tactical thinking. Why the snowy peak specifically? What was the strategic advantage there?
This was the absolute core of Hercules' cleverness here. He transformed a natural challenge, the harsh mountain winter, into his advantage. As the sources describe the process, the higher he drove the boar, the deeper the snow became, and the colder the temperatures plummeted.
Right.
He was essentially changing the battlefield to one where the boar was at a severe disadvantage.
And how did that extreme cold, that deep snow environment, affect a creature built for tearing through lower altitudes, a creature of vast weight?
This is where the strategy just dramatically paid off. The deep, icy snow acted like a natural immobilizer.
Like quicksand almost.
Exactly. A creature of such immense weight, designed for powering through forests on solid ground, was utterly hampered. The sources describe it becoming sluggish, its powerful legs sinking uselessly into the deep drifts with every single step. Its immense strength, its momentum were just neutralized. Its movements became severely restricted by the harsh environment. It was completely bogged down.
But Hercules wasn't.
Hercules, lighter and probably better adapted to the conditions from his time hunting on the mountain, could move more freely. He could keep the pressure on, keep driving it deeper into the snow.
Ah, so he didn't try to fight its strength head-to-head at all. He used its own weight and the environment to basically incapacitate it.
Yeah.
That's truly a victory of intellect and endurance over just raw, untamed power.
Exactly. The monstrous, rampaging terror that had devastated whole regions was, through careful observation, strategic planning, and patient execution, reduced to this struggling, exhausted beast, trapped and neutralized by the very elements Hercules had driven it into.
That's brilliant.
It's a powerful illustration, isn't it? Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in direct confrontation, but in understanding the weaknesses of your opponent and using your surroundings to your advantage.
So the boar is finally trapped, exhausted, struggling there in the deep snow on the mountain heights. This was the moment Hercules had worked for, the culmination of his whole strategy.
It was his opportunity. Hercules, seeing the boar immobilized and worn down by the environment he had used against it, he seized his chance. He leaped onto its back.
Still dangerous, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. Grappling with this still immense, though hampered, creature. The sources describe him wrestling the enormous beast and finally managing to subdue it, binding its powerful legs tightly with ropes. He had achieved the impossible condition. He had captured the Erymanthian boar alive.
Incredible. And then came perhaps the most, well, incredible physical feat of this labor, getting this massive live captured beast all the way back to King Eurystheus in Mycenae.
Yes, this required one final astonishing display of sheer physical might, but now it was the strength needed just to deliver the prize. With what the texts call a monumental effort, Hercules hoisted the bound, struggling, probably bellowing boar onto his shoulders.
Can you even imagine that sight?
It's hard to. A lone figure descending from the snowy mountains, carrying a creature of vast weight that was still very much alive and fighting against its bonds.
Must have been terrifying for anyone who saw him coming.
Probably. Our sources provide this visceral detail, noting that he returned with the boar carried on his left shoulder and that his back was staining his back with blood from the stricken wound.
Ouch.
Likely meaning the scrapes and injuries he sustained during the difficult process of wrestling, subduing, and then hauling this massive wild animal all that way.
An astonishing physical feat, a testament to his legendary power, even after the strategic challenge and the emotional weight of the Centaur tragedy. But how did the cowardly King Eurystheus react when Hercules finally arrived back in Mycenae with the live, struggling boar on his shoulder?
This is, without a doubt, the most famous and frankly absurdly comical moment associated with this labor.
Yeah.
And it perfectly underscores the stark contrast between the immense heroism of Hercules and the, well, character of the man who commanded him.
Okay, lay it on us.
When Hercules arrived at the palace gates in Mycenae and with a final effort just cast the massive, still snorting and struggling boar down at the entrance to the assembly of the Mycenaeans, King Eurystheus' reaction was immediate, visceral, and entirely predictable. He was absolutely paralyzed with terror.
Terrified of the very live boar he had ordered Hercules to bring back.
Precisely. Faced with the terrifying reality of the powerful wild beast he had demanded, Eurystheus was just overcome with fear. He immediately, probably stammering, ordered Hercules to get the monstrous thing away from him as quickly as possible.
We did it away.
And then, in what has become this iconic image of the labors, a moment of extreme, almost unbelievable cowardice, he hid himself in a bronze vessel.
He did what?
Hid himself in a bronze vessel. Many sources specify this was a large bronze storage jar, a pithos.
Hid in a giant jar. You can almost picture it. The king, huddled in a pot, terrified of the very creature he made Hercules risk his life to capture.
It is an iconic image, isn't it? Humiliatingly hiding, refusing to come out until Hercules had removed the beast. This humiliating display by the king became an iconic image of the labors, perfectly encapsulating Eurystheus' pettiness, his abject fear, his utter lack of courage.
Especially compared to Hercules.
Exactly. Starkly highlighted against the backdrop of Hercules' extraordinary bravery, strategic thinking, and immense capability.
So you have Hercules, the hero, standing there, probably exhausted but triumphant, with the captured bellowing beast at his feet. And the king, who orchestrated the whole dangerous affair, is literally hiding in a storage jar.
Exactly. It's such a powerful visual metaphor for their contrasting characters and their roles in the myths. Hercules, well, he simply carried the boar away, probably released it back into the wilderness somewhere far from Mycenae.
It's completed.
Task completed. Another impossible task done, proving his extraordinary worth yet again, much to Eurystheus' continued terror and, frankly, public humiliation. So looking back at the Erymanthian boar labor through the lens of all these sources, it's really clear this was much more than just another monster hunting story. It wasn't just a simple test of brute force.
No.
As we've seen, it's really a profound testament to the multifaceted nature of Hercules' heroism.
Right. While his incredible strength was definitely necessary for the final capture and that daunting journey back,
Sure.
this labor primarily showcased other crucial heroic qualities. His patience during the tracking, his deep understanding of the wilderness, his strategic ingenuity in using the environment as a weapon.
And his sheer physical and mental endurance throughout the entire ordeal. Don't forget that.
Absolutely.
It was fundamentally a victory that required intellect, strategic thinking, and perseverance, not just overwhelming physical might applied directly. It also serves as this potent reminder of the untamed, dangerous aspects of the natural world in ancient Greek thought and mythology.
With the boar embodying that wild, destructive power.
Exactly. And the often thin line that separates civilization from the wilderness.
And by successfully subduing this primal force, capturing it alive rather than merely destroying it, Hercules not only reaffirms humanity's potential dominance over nature, at least the hero's potential dominance, but he also demonstrates that this wildness often requires a unique blend of power and understanding, force and cunning, to be truly overcome or managed.
And this story, with its mix of heroic feat, clever strategy, that tragic interlude with Pholus, and even that dark humor at the end.
Right, the jar.
It resonated powerfully throughout antiquity and beyond. Our sources are pretty comprehensive in listing its enduring presence across centuries of classical literature and art. You find compelling references in core Greek tragedies and epics like Sophocles' Trachiniae and Apollonius Rhodius' Argonautica, which shows its importance in defining Hercules' character within those big narratives.
And it wasn't just confined to Greek texts either, was it? It made its way into major Roman works, too.
Absolutely. Appearing in Ovid's sprawling metamorphoses where myths are always being transformed and retold, and even getting a mention in Virgil's foundational epic, the Aeneid.
Wow, so it's really embedded in the culture.
Deeply. And it's detailed in the major historical and mythological compilations that ancient scholars and writers relied on, like the accounts by Diodorus Siculus and the Pseudo-Apollodorus. It kept getting recounted and preserved right through the Byzantine period. It was a story that just had staying power because it was seen as such a crucial part of the hero's defining journey.
And beyond literature, the sources also mention its vivid depiction in visual art, that famous black-figured amphora by the Antimenes painter, for instance.
Yes.
He captures that iconic moment, showing Hercules, Eurystheus probably huddled in his jar.
You have to assume.
And the boar.
Yeah.
These visual representations, they kept the story alive and tangible for people who might not have ever read the text themselves.
Yeah, art played a huge role in solidifying these images in the public consciousness. And then there's that intriguing, if highly improbable claim found in some sources about physical relics.
Oh yeah, like what?
Specifically, the Erymanthian boar's tusks supposedly being preserved in the sanctuary of Apollo at Cumae.
get out, really.
Well, our source correctly notes that this claim is without a shred of probability.
Okay, fair enough.
But the fact that people made such claims, that they wanted physical proof of these mythical feats, it speaks volumes about how real and important these stories felt to people in the ancient world. They weren't just abstract tales, they felt like part of a lived history, a connection to that heroic past.
Well, our deep dive into the Erymanthian Boar labor really shows us a Hercules who is, well, a much more complex and interesting figure than just the strongman you sometimes see, like in cartoons or something.
Definitely.
He's a strategic thinker, he's an endurance runner, a master of adapting to his environment, and a figure whose very power carries this potential for tragedy, as we saw so clearly with Pholus.
It's a powerful narrative. It strongly challenges that assumption that every problem can just be solved with overwhelming force. It highlights the critical value of patient observation, strategic thinking, and effectively using your surroundings, your environment, to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And that tragic episode with Pholus adds that vital layer of human, well, and centaur, cost, reminding us that even heroic strength can have unintended and sorrowful consequences for those nearby.
Thinking about the way Hercules used the environment, the deep snow, to overcome the boar's strength where direct force wouldn't work,
Yeah.
it really makes you consider challenges in a different light. It raises an interesting question for you listening to mull over. Where else in history, or maybe even in your own life, have you seen complex problems overcome, not by direct force or confrontation, but by clever adaptation, patience, and a really deep understanding of the specific environment or context you're operating within?
It definitely shifts the definition of strength, doesn't it? Beyond just muscle to encompass intellect and understanding and patience.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into one of Hercules' most revealing labors.